Greetings. The following edited recording is of myself, Professor Mark Gura, in conversation with Mr. Jason Innes of KinderLab Robotics. This conversation took place in the online class I teach for Touro University's Graduate School of Technology titled Technology Integration for School Leaders. This conversation is a segment of a unit I offer my students on how to teach AI to K through 12 students. This discussion focuses on teaching AI to very young students. The approach discussed is to use simple, kid and teacher-friendly robotics resources. Student robotics is a particularly rich and fruitful technology learning experience, highly appropriate for young children. To give my graduate students a little extra background, I showed them a short YouTube demo of the Kibo robotics learning materials before our conversation with Jason began. You may want to view this as well. Links to this and other related resources can be found in the notes below. This conversation focuses on an extensive curriculum that KinderLab offers free through its website and that offers AI instructional value for teachers who have some familiarity with robotics and those without as well. Please subscribe to this channel and like this video, as that will result in more teachers seeing this. Our guest is Jason Innes.
Hi, Professor Gura. Hi, class.
Good to see you again, Jason. It's been a while. Like last time you were participating in a panel I was doing virtually for ISTE. So you're a little bit older.
Right, definitely.
As is Kibo. So while I'm joking around about that, how old is Kibo? It's not really an infant anymore, is it?
No, it's probably about 14 or 15 years old at this point. So KinderLab Robotics, the company that I work for that sort of manufactures Kibo and provides it to teachers and schools, we started in 2013. But that company was the result of a National Science Foundation grant that our co-founder, Professor Marina Bears, received to take the robot that she had proven to be effective and successful with early childhood through her research, to take that and sort of manufacture it at scale. So there was a good 3 years of R&D where the sort of effectiveness of the robot was proven by Dr. Bears and her team before KinderLab even started. So it's a long pedigree. Time flies.
And by now, it's a good many schools.
There's about 25,000 Kibos out there in the field, and we're in schools in every state in the US, as well as many countries worldwide. So including the New York City schools, plenty of districts within New York State. So we're excited about that.
Actually, I started looking into student robotics probably close to 35 years ago now. Back then, if you were to speak to the teachers or the students about robots, it was very much science fiction. They were in cartoons and movies and comic books, and the context was, well, someday. Little by little, the world has been flooded with real robots. So this is a very different context that kids are learning about this. And it would have been a hell of a stretch back then to suggest to kids that you can learn about robots and join the robotics industry. There is such a thing now. Back then, doing robotics with kindergarten kids and first graders, that would have been a fantasy. But this is very much for that very early band of grades.
Yeah, the science fictional element sort of touches on one of the big threads, which is, of course, like the role of technology in our society and our culture. Where children are surrounded by technology all the time, whether it's, their parents' iPhone, something very common, or the AI that's built into the Alexas or even their car's navigation system, or robotics, like Professor Gura said. So there are robots that manage like the supply chain fulfillment at Amazon, moving things around the warehouse. There are robotic systems really even in the school bathroom when you put your hands under the faucet and there's a sensor that tells the water to come on. That's in a sense a little robotic system. So children are surrounded by technology all the time, but it's rare that they get the chance to kind of create and control these systems, and that empowering sense of using these systems to create, to imagine a solution to a problem and then build that solution. That sense of empowerment really changes kids' relationship with technology. You know, at this age, we want them to feel the experience of being creators with technology rather than just users. And to do that, you really need a system that is developmentally appropriate and designed for that age group. So that's where kind of the early childhood element comes in.
By now, I've looked at just about every student robotics system on the market. This has been one of the things I've specialized in. I was very taken with Kibo from the very beginning because it's screen-free. These little kids don't need to be sitting at a computer or working with a mouse. Very brilliant that you created this. Kids at that age love building blocks.
Mm-hmm.
They're playing with blocks. The blocks have a barcode, and the robot has a barcode reader. And of course, Kibo actually has an onboard processor, a computer. So it really is full-blown robotics in every respect. I mean, you demonstrated in that little video that importantly for our discussion about AI in a moment or two, that you have sensors.
Mm-hmm.
Kibo can hear sound. You can also control it through making sound. So there's the barcode reader at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And there you have the barcode reader looking at the barcodes on the blocks. I found this all to be very brilliant. This is real programming.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can see the commands there. Forward, backward, and go 4 units, whatever they are.
Mm-hmm.
In every sense, real coding. This is a language that little humans use to communicate with a machine and tell the machine what they want it to do. Thinking about coding, to me, robotics has always been the very best approach because you get this terrific feedback loop. In other words, tell that robot what you want it to do, and if it doesn't do it, the next thing to think about is how did you not give the commands properly?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, that way of framing coding as a method of communicating your intentions to the robot, I think is a really powerful way to think about coding, because it puts the emphasis on the children's intention, the children's creativity, and the idea that they are the ones controlling these systems, whether it's a computer or a robot. And the other point that you brought out there, Professor Gura, about the physicality of a robot, and this applies to both coding and AI. Young children have trouble with engaging with concepts completely abstractly. So when we can give them a robot that they can actually see physically acting out the commands that they've created, it helps reinforce the learning. So in the same way that the blocks allow them to think about programs in a concrete way, the movement of the robot allows them to think about the effect of the program in a concrete way too. In fact, it sort of loops back to Seymour Papert, the inventor of the Lego Mindstorms robot, has this wonderful phrase, objects to think with, which really encapsulates that idea that, especially for young children, none of us can think about things entirely in the abstract. We think about abstract concepts in terms of how they are reflected in our experience of the world. And that's what robotics really does for coding, especially at this age, is it gives the children an object to think with.
And they're learning about the world that way. They're still very much in a spatial, tactile mode, so it's perfect for them. But I think even older kids, in a way, particularly ones who have difficulty visualizing, would get a lift out of using Kibo, or this scheme of, I mean, this has a little bit of a child look, But you can basically take this approach and bring it up in the grades. At any rate, a couple of weeks back, I was minding my own business, looking for things to bring into this class, some interest for AI. The mass of material out there and ideas and assertions is overwhelming. And lo and behold, here's Kibo in my inbox with an offer. Get a free curriculum to teach AI. Tonight's about AI, but again, I think robotics is a very good way into that. You can go get your own copy of this. This just hit me that thinking about 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds learning AI, this is the first generation ever for whom this is square one normal. For us, this is something vastly different and very special. But if you're 7 years old, your world is now driven by AI and will continue to be. And so I particularly appreciate that you put this curriculum out and it's free to everyone. Now, of course, the curriculum is to use with Kibo, but as I look through this 24, 25-page curriculum with a lot of ideas, there's a lot in there for teachers who don't have access to Kibo right now as well.
Yeah.
How long was this thinking with Kibo introducing artificial intelligence in early grades piece? How long did it take you guys to develop this?
We developed it over a period of probably about 6 months. We started with communicating with a lot of our users, actually. A lot of our teachers who are using Kibo to engage with computer science standards and K-2 and K-5 computer science teaching, and asked them, what do you all? We felt that there was a kind of more fundamental question, which is, what can we do to teach young children what these AI tools are all about? Like, how does AI work? What does it mean? In sort of the ways that you're talking about robots. We see robots fictionalized all around us, and there's lots of imagination about what they might do. But if we can take the core concepts of robotics, a machine controlled by a program, designed by a human engineer with sensors and actuators like motors, if we can boil it down into concepts that a young child can understand, they can engage with technology in a more confident way. And that was our goal, our driving principle with exploring an AI curriculum. We got good feedback from, our user base was telling us we're interested in AI, but, it's not part of the computer science standards yet. We all know that sort of standards development train can roll slowly. Teaching about AI really is teaching computer science. So thinking about computer science education standards, the goals of computer science education in New York, with introducing kids to the idea of like an algorithm, of breaking a problem down into smaller steps, of engaging with the idea of sensors and how a system can respond to its environment. We can explore a lot of those concepts through the lens of learning about AI as well. So we can think about AI as like a technology application in a sense, and we want children to understand how it works. And as they do, they're engaging with the technology standards we need to teach anyway.
Let's drill down to what's in the curriculum a little bit. I mean, here's the table of contents.
Yeah.
Some of what you offer teachers here is how to talk to kids about AI and get them to understand what AI is in broad terms. And then there are some robot specific activities. Well, I want to make a slight digression, and then we'll look at a couple of items that are in the curriculum. And since December of 2020, in New York State, we've had this set of standards, which probably got lost in the shuffle with COVID. Just as this was going to heat up and become a thing, the world of school had to go in another direction. But anyhow, these standards remain, and I highlighted this grade band here, K through 1 and grades 2 through 3. Now, these are the New York State Computer Science and Digital Fluency Learning Standards. To the best of my understanding, I don't think people who teach these grades have a very good idea about what they're going to reach for to get these kids to these standards.
Hmm.
These are the areas here. The impacts of computing, well, in my mind, that's AI. I mean, maybe you want to make a comment about that.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that's one of the focuses that we took was and the fifth lesson in the curriculum actually is connected to that line of standards. So looking at ways that technology can be used positively or negatively, understanding the ways technological tools like affect students' lives, and all of those are critical connections to the standards.
So, impact of computing, computational thinking. How do you teach that to first graders? I mean, in my mind, the whole schema of the blocks with the barcodes and the barcode code, I mean, that's perfect for that.
Mhm.
Digital literacy. So, of these five key areas, I think a good swath of that is covered and well for those early grades.
Yeah, thank you. Those elements of computational thinking, they share a lot of overlap with AI education as well. And they also share a lot with just child development skills at that age. I mean, having children understand the logical sequence of actions that go into a complex behavior, breaking long jobs down into smaller steps, those are all just cognitive skills that kids are learning at this age. And they're also part of computational thinking. So it really is a much more natural fit for early childhood than it may seem at first.
Yeah, what I have on the screen now are four big bullet concepts that you believe that kids should take away from this experience. And I think, you've really distilled this down to what we all need to understand. So maybe you want to go through these real quickly.
Sure. Sure, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for highlighting these. I mean, this sort of gets to that, the earlier question you asked about kind of our mission and the development process. Just like we want children to feel like they can create and master technological tools, both for developing their self-confidence and also, thinking ahead to like STEM workforce development. We want children to think about AI as something that isn't magic, that it's a tool, designed and made by human engineers, that AI systems kind of behave according to rules and the input that they gather from either their sensors in the case of robots or your typed input in the case of a large language model, that these inputs, these rules govern the behavior of the systems. They're not just sort of acting at random. They're not thinking for themselves really in the way that human beings do. And that as children sort of can experiment with something like Kibo that implements pretty simple rule-based behavior and sensor-driven interactions, we think they can start to build up that core understanding that lets them see that these AI systems aren't magic. But then more importantly, we do, when you get to that impacts of computing point that you made, Professor Gura, that doesn't mean that these tools aren't amazing resources for us humans to use to solve challenging problems or to sort of magnify our own thinking powers. So we want children to also, we want to demystify the tools, but at the same time, not put down the power that these tools can give humans to solve important problems.
I listen to podcasts often from people who are celebrities and ostensibly really intelligent, well-educated, sensible people. And I listen to them talk about AI, and I wish they would take away these four takeaways. And maybe all of this craziness about humans losing control of AI and evil AI taking over the planet. And you know what I'm talking about. It's because they
Definitely.
don't understand these basic concepts. And what better time to lay this foundation than the early grades? Here's another bit that I lifted from the curriculum. These are synopses of the lessons.
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of discussion. Maybe paint a picture for us. You
Sure.
know, the class is at the rug, so to speak, and Kibo and attachments are there and there's a conversation going on, or
From a curriculum design point of view, this all of KinderLab's curriculum follows some basic frameworks that were successful in Professor Bears's research-based curriculum. So the studies that were done with Kibo, like I mentioned, 15 years ago, had a certain lesson structure that combined some circle time conversation, usually a movement-based or music-based game that got the kids kind of up and moving, small group work with the robots. So kids collaborate in groups of 2 to 4 children per robot. So we're always engaging that social emotional element, that peer mentoring, that small group give and take that's part of early childhood education. And then closing with what we call an engineering circle, where we share out, we talk about things that were challenging. We ask the students to highlight ideas and inspiration that they got from their peers. So really trying to do a closing circle, but with an emphasis on collaboration. So that's the lesson format that we've used for our core curriculum, and it's what we used for thinking with Kibo as well. So each of these lessons are about an hour long, and they follow that structure of an opening circle, a connection, movement-based, music-based activity, small group work, and then a closing circle. Like you mentioned, Professor Gura, we do structure these lessons around the parts and terminology and capabilities of Kibo, but these lessons could be used with really any robot that had some basic sensor capabilities built in. We found, as we were trying to think about the level to strike with this curriculum, so we're approaching these AI concepts through sort of analogies with Kibo's capabilities, and it would be almost impossible to do that without at least some of the more advanced sensors, like you mentioned, that Kibo has. So this curriculum is meant to be for maybe 2nd or 3rd graders and those who have progressed somewhat through our core curriculum, to where they can use like the proximity sensor, the light sensor, the sound sensor. Because that idea of this, you can see it in lesson 2 there, the idea of the sense, think, act cycle, which is an important part of, or lesson 3, I guess, as well. That idea that a robot can perceive its environment, make decisions about what to do, decisions in quotes, because it's actually controlled by the human engineer who designed the program, and then respond to the environment. That's one of the big parallels between robotics and AI. So any robot that has that capability, you could use the curriculum with it.
you kind of anticipated my big question here. I think all of us understand the robot, and we understand tell the robot to move forward 4 paces, to take a right turn, go 3 paces, to spin around and stop. That's easy to understand. Where does the AI come into this? So is there a degree of independence?
Yeah, there is. And with Kibo, that the independence that the robot has is based on programs that the children give it. So that's one of the big differences between like a sort of large language model AI that's based on these sophisticated machine learning algorithms and Kibo. For example, lesson 3 there, which is the Kibo rover. In that one, the children create a program where Kibo is able to run what we call a forever loop, which is the program will just continue to run forever. And throughout the program, the robot will use its proximity sensor to essentially navigate a room by approaching an obstacle, sort of reacting to the obstacle, changing its path, moving forward, and repeating that cycle over and over again. So the robot is able to act independently, but it's in a way that the children can see that they created the program that's giving the robot its independent capabilities. So that allows us to bridge that sort of jumping point that's important in understanding AI of what does it mean for a system to operate in a kind of way that seems completely autonomous from human programmers. We want children to see that just because the robot or the system appears to be operating independently, that doesn't mean that human engineers weren't involved in defining the rules that the system operates by.
Well, I think that's a great explanation, and that's very profound. Instead of you program the robot to move 4 spaces, take a right turn for 2 spaces and stop, now you have a loop. So this robot is told to keep moving and keep navigating, and its proximity sensor tells it when it's too close to something, and at that point it can do something else. I mean, that's like a real Roomba
Mhm.
vacuum robot.
Yep.
There's nothing toy-like about that. But also, I really like what you said about how the young students get to see it's their program that enables Kibo to be this somewhat independent acting entity.
Yeah, that's an important overarching message that we try to keep throughout all our curriculum is that the students are the human engineers, and without a human engineer making decisions, having that intentionality that you talked about at the beginning, these systems don't really have any value. You know, it's human beings that bring the value to these tools, and we want children to be empowered with that. With the Rover program as well, we give the children the opportunity to use different sensors as well to sort of model exploring the environment as well. So for example, a child who wanted to take it a little farther could add to that proximity sensor, maybe the light sensor, and have Kibo react, for example, flashing its own light or playing a sound when it enters a dark area. So in that sense, they can actually create a program where the independent operation of the robot begins to sort of do scientific research about the environment in the same way that robotic probes, for example, on Mars might. So we do make a connection to the Opportunity rover, and the reading in this lesson is a book about opportunity. So we want children to see that what they're doing here is modeling real sort of scientific systems and the actual work of STEM professionals.
It's clear here in the overview, you state the students will create a rover robot that uses its sensors and programming to explore a new environment. It's sent out in motion
Mhm.
to learn a little bit,
Right.
to see, to perceive what's there and interpret it. You've really distilled this down. Robot behavior is sense, think, and
Mhm.
act. And, for first graders, second graders, I think that's really beginning to understand what this is all about.
That's a nice parallel too between robotics and AI, is that sort of loop of taking in information, processing it based on rules, and then taking some kind of action, whether that's, Alexa speaking back to you in response to your prompt, or whether it's Kibo operating in response to the proximity data that its sensors are receiving.
Well, congratulations. I think this is a brilliant system for teaching very young kids some really crucial concepts and skills for the world they're entering. And I think we'll leave it there, Jason. Thanks very much for joining us. I want to thank you very much for dropping in and sharing Kibo and Kibo's intelligence with us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for the invitation and for the kind words about Kibo. And I would encourage anyone who's curious to download this curriculum, and I would love to hear what any of you think about it. Thank you.